Okay, well, I'm talking about pride today, and this is a doozy for me because pride has been an issue in my life since I started walking. That was a joke. None of you laughed. I didn't do it in the first service, but maybe I was very arrogant when I started walking too. Who knows? Pride is an issue. We're doing a series on soul detox. We're talking about things that come in between us and our relationship with God and with people and with exercising our faith. And a big one is pride. Big enough that we're doing it this morning. Paul asked me to do it because I have a lot to learn in pride. I think it's a little side move that he did. And so I've had 2 weeks to suffer and think about my own pride issues and then craft a message through it, okay? So this is good. This is good for me. Paul's happy. We're all happy. So it's good to be proud of other people. It's good to be proud of your family, your kids, what other people accomplish and what they do. This is a good thing. To be happy for them, to be proud of what they do. My daughter just started walking. I'm very proud of her for that. In the parent world, I'm like, you do it. It's now scary because she's running into walls and hurting herself. But okay, we're getting there. But here's what I'm going to talk about pride. And what pride, the line is when we let... if we're proud of what we've accomplished through God, but the line would be with pride is we start taking the gifts that God's given us and the abilities and the accomplishments and taking those accolades and onto ourselves and building ourselves up by what we've done. Does that make sense? So it's good to be proud of what we've done through God and what we've accomplished, what other people have accomplished. But when you take what you've done, mate, for instance, and then you let it get to your head, and then you build yourself up through it, that's pride. Pride is taking it on yourself. Now, I'm going to talk about this morning what it does to us, some ways we can see it, and then what God thinks about it, and I'm going to reference one character in the Bible that we can learn from, and then we're just going to come before God and be thankful for what we do have through Him. That's what we're going to do this morning, so in case you needed to know. Now you can relax. Now, what I also need to say is that I am not perfect in this area. This is an area I've had to work on, and I will continue to work on, I think, many times in my life. So I'm speaking from a place of, I'm here too. I'm learning this, and I hope we can all learn this more together this morning. The first thing you can know about pride, and we can know together, is that, so number one, if you're taking notes, is God hates pride. God despises pride. He's not a fan. If you go into Proverbs, if you read a proverb a day, if you're into that, it's good to be into that. If you're reading Proverbs, it's full of thoughts about the proud, about being prideful. I'll read a few to you. Proverbs 16:5 says, the Lord detests all the proud of heart. Say that again. The Lord detests. Strong language. He detests the proud of heart. Be sure of this, they will not go unpunished. So if you're full of pride this morning, that's for you. You can wrap up. We can do communion now. You will not go unpunished. Very strong. I was like, oh man, that's strong. Okay. James 4:6 says, some of you are nervously laughing, and I love it. I love it. You're like, okay, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to me? God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. It's if you want a definition of what pride is, it'll pull up on the screen. It's a high or inordinate opinion of one's own dignity, importance, merit, or superiority, whether as cherished in the mind or as displayed in bearing, conduct, etc. Key words here: superiority, importance. So pride is self-elevating. You move yourself above other people in your mind. Some of it, most of it, I think most of pride is hard to see because it's in our mind and in our heart. Some of it we see in conduct, some of it. But I think a lot of it, if you're a person that struggles with pride, and I think we all do in certain elements, but like really you've worked through pride, it's in your mind where you build yourself up. You've maybe heard, who's heard the saying, pride comes before the fall. Who's heard that before? Okay, yeah, a few nods. Yeah, we're here. Is everyone awake this morning? Did you have your coffee? I said we're going to have fun. We're going to enjoy. Okay, let's get there. Pride comes before the fall. Now, I'm not necessarily going to give all these examples of falling, like what it means to fall because you have pride. And maybe here, the other thing with pride is what can be annoying if you've been around a person who's very arrogant. You're like, when's the fall going to happen for them, God? Right? You've never thought that. You're like, God, you see this? Punish. Because don't quote hey, I know, go to your boss or something hey, I know there's a lot of pride and just want you to know it says in Proverbs 16, you will not go unpunished. You can quote that to your spouse later when there's an argument and one's not backing down. You will not go unpunished, says Proverbs. Pride is a scary, scary thing. I'm going to work through a few things which it can do. I'll give you an example of how I've struggled with pride. I love sports. I used to play a lot of sports. Here's a photo of me when I used to play rugby. It'll come up there. It's a bit humbling. Some of you are laughing like, wow, So as I've talked about me playing rugby, you probably pictured a very strong, strapping rugby player. This is me probably wearing a small or medium-sized jersey and I'm swimming in it. Can't see my legs, not a lot of muscle on them. I didn't want to have too much humiliation. But here's what you need to know in my mind right now. I'm 250 pounds. I'm 6'5". I'm unstoppable. And no one on the field is as good as me. That's where I was with pride, to be totally honest. Because sports is great. You have to have confidence when you're playing sports. You have to be assured in yourself, and you almost have to be a bit edgy, I would say. We can beat this other team. Now with me, I took that attitude, which I was very good at, and then added elements of pride, which I was even better at. I'm bragging about my pride issues, so I've struggled with this, right? So in my mind, I was the best, and I was better than everyone else. And I look at them, and in my mind, I'd just list out reasons why they were not as good as me, and how I could beat them, and how I could run them over, and how I was faster. Look at this look. I'm scary in my face, but my body is not representing that. But what pride does is it's a comparison game, and you're always comparing. And you start putting down everyone else to what? Elevate yourself. So this is what I did with sports. It all hit me one day. I didn't even tell the first service, but when it hit me? I was in a game and I was maybe a little bigger because I didn't hit my growth spurt until grade 12. It's just a late bloomer, but it was great. It hit in grade 12 and it hit, and I'm there. And in grade 12, an instance came up, and I had hurt another rugby player very bad on the field. And then someone else came up, and this is a low for me. And they wanted to fight me, and we were at each other like this, and I had no fear, and I knew anything could have taken place. I didn't care that I just hurt this guy because I was better and I was bigger and I was above them. And in that moment, I went home from that game. I said, I was thinking about the game, and it had gone too far for me. I stopped. I had to change the way I was thinking. And I don't play sports, and a lot of the big reasons why came out of retirement one game for the church team this year. But why I honestly don't like it? Why? It just brings back pride in me. And it's an ugly thing, and I don't like it. And it helps me win games, so we had a great game with the guys. Sure, it helps, but it's nothing I enjoy being inside me. What we can know, when we compare based on what we've built up with us. I'll give you some examples, and don't wait for an example that you're like, oh, he didn't say my example, so it must not relate to me. Don't cancel yourself out. Because remember, God punishes those who are the prideful heart. God. So pride is thinking like this. So what you've done, who you are, what you have accomplished, the degree you have, the car you drive, the house you have, where your house is, the girlfriend you have, the boyfriend you have, the looks you have, etc., 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 makes you better than other people. This is what pride can do. So when you let that in your mind, it's always a comparison game with other people. So as soon as you meet someone, as soon as you see how they dress, how they look, what their title is, what kind of car they drive, you are either belittling them or saying they can hang out with you or not. Who's ever had a thought like that? Like, we instantly compare. There's a show on Netflix, and one of the episodes, they have a take on this. It's about ranking people. And what they do in this show, who's ever been on like TripAdvisor or Yelp and you rank the business or whatever, it's all about those stars, those 5 stars. And in this show, it's like a futuristic show, and they've made it based on ranking other people. So when you meet someone, you instantly give them 5 out of 5 stars or 3 out of 5 stars, and they just carried it forward that you can't rent certain apartments or live in certain areas if you don't have 5 stars, 4 stars. You can't go to certain events if you don't have this. So it's all about comparing and ranking. That we do this in our mind. I laughed at them like we're getting to this place in society because we already are there in our minds. But it's like you can literally see, it's like, I don't know if anyone's ever used an Uber before. You want to get a good star rating so people trust you, so you get more money, you get more business. It's all about that ranking. And this show, you could see, they made it see right when you met someone, they would rank you right away and you'd see the star count you have from them and you average out. Crazy. That's what was happening. But I think we do that in our minds with people. And so pride builds yourself up. It's selfish at the core of it. Pride is selfishness because you want the attention on who? You, me. That's why it's dangerous, because it's a place in our mind. When you get to a place in your mind and you're constantly comparing, but not comparing to hoping you'd be like them, but you're belittling people in your mind and always raising yourself up above them, man, that's scary what can come out of that. Second thing you should know is pride grows. It starts somewhere, but it always grows and gets worse. If you don't have an issue of pride and you're sitting here very humbly in your chair thinking, wow, I don't have an issue with pride, you do have an issue with pride because now you're bragging about in your mind about how humble you are. Interesting, right? I caught you. So as it grows, some of the things I've mentioned, they can get worse, but internally. But it's ugly up there or in your heart. Now, and one of the side effects of pride is that it isolates you from other people. Because when you think you're better than other people, you don't want to be with them. You don't want their help. You don't want their attention because you don't think they're good enough to have your time. Because your time should be shared with the people that are as good as you. So pride then begins to isolate. A quote I found online is, pride will always be the longest distance between two people. If we want to relate it to a relationship, marriages, where's the biggest hiccup when trying to resolve an issue? One person thinks they're right. One person thinks the other is wrong. One person thinks they are better and the other person should humble themselves before them. Who's ever been in that situation in a marriage? Yeah, okay. Bunch of dishonest folks in the house. This is one of the major things that if you've been in an argument in a relationship, pride never solves the argument, does it? It never does. It extends it. It causes it to go on for days. It isolates you from people. Whether it's internally they don't know, which is worse, I think, or they start to pick up on it, you feel like you're better than them. The worst thing about pride is that it moves you away from God. Because when you think you've got it all under control and that you've done it all on your own and all the things that have happened in your life are because of you and what you have done, then that automatically shifts your thinking, and then you stop thanking God for what He has done. And you stop praising Him for who He is and where He's brought you to. That is the worst place we can be with pride. Dwight L. Moody, the famous evangelist, says, God sends no one away empty-handed except those who are full of themselves. Very interesting line that he said. And I think there's some truth to that, where we can even read about that rich young ruler who came before God, and he had everything that he thought he needed, but he had built that empire for himself, and he got sent away because he wasn't able to give it up. He struggled with pride. I know it was a lot based on material possessions, but he was thinking well of himself because of all the things he said to Jesus what he was doing. One of the best examples in the Bible of someone, or the extreme example in the Bible, is someone who struggled with pride and really let it bring them down, is King Nebuchadnezzar. And we find his story in Daniel. We're going to just look at it just a little bit. So when you often read this narrative in the Bible, we read about what God did through the men when they were put in the fire, and the faithfulness they had to God. But I'm just going to look, and I'm not going to, that's amazing. That's the best part about the story. But I'm just going to look at who King Nebuchadnezzar was, so we can relate or kind of learn from his pride issues. Now, he was a very successful king, and he built an empire, and he built at the time one of the most beautiful large cities, they say, on the earth. Now, they even claim one of his attributes, you can look it up online later, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which is his city that he built. It's one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world. I'll read a quote from scholars online. Although his palaces, which he constructed, were all in Babylon, there were numerous temples built in other cities. The city of Babylon itself, however, was regarded as the symbol of his power and his majesty, and he spared no expense or effort to make it the most beautiful city in the world. If the construction of a great city, magnificent in size, architecture, parks, and armaments was a proper basis for pride, then Nebuchadnezzar was justified. What he had forgotten was that none of this would be possible apart from God's sovereign will. So King Nebuchadnezzar had many things to base his confidence, his abilities off of. He built an empire. He built an amazing city that the world at the time was talking about. And he had spared no expense to do it. Then he let it all get to his head. We can even read in Daniel 4:29, in this account, he walked out and looked over his city and said, Is this not the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence, by my power and for the glory of my majesty? Interesting, isn't it? So he took what he had done, probably we can say nothing by his hand, actually constructing it, but he had created it. Maybe he had the vision for it, who knows? But you don't build a city one man. You build it with a great team. You build it with amazing people around you. You build it with the highest skilled people. I look at the opposite in my mind. One example is our pastor Paul seems to have very little ounces of pride in him from what I've seen for 3 years of working with him. He's a very, very humble guy. And Pastor Paul is very good at creating a team around him. A good team, not just meaning myself. We can acknowledge that though. No, just joking. We're talking about pride. Paul brings great people around him, and then when the praises or encouragement comes, he's very quick to encourage the team and say, look what they have done. But Paul is a really strong leader in this regard, because this isn't a trap for him. That's why Paul is the senior pastor of a great church with amazing people in it. And it's doing very well, and we're reaching, we can clap for him, So it's good. Maybe Paul saw my issues of pride and said, Landry, perfect. Speak on it. Now, we know that Nebuchadnezzar's dreams were being interpreted, and then he acknowledges the God who interpreted those dreams. If you read this account multiple times, King Nebuchadnezzar praises and acknowledges the God of these men. And see, what I want to highlight by that is when you're in church when you know God and you've seen his power move, it doesn't mean you can't have pride. Because this king multiple times kept seeing God move and acknowledged God was moving. But then right after he saw the first time God moving, what did he do in this account? He built a massive statue of who? Not the God who spoke into his life, but himself. It's crazy. After he saw the power of God move. So pride can be a trap for us even when we know God and see him moving, which is, I find this very interesting. So he built this statue, and I know, I could be wrong, but I know none of us have built statues of ourselves at range of the height that this statue went to. Anyone? Good. And I know maybe no one forced everyone to worship that statue. But so obviously this king went to a very, very extreme place of pride. But what I want to just point out to you and pose a question to you, because pride at a lesser extent makes everything about you. So in your world right now, in what you do, where is the focus end at? Does the focus tend to come back to you? Just posing the question. Because pride wants that. Wants the attention back to you. Wants the accolades. And that's a dangerous thing, is when you have a skill, when you have an ability, that's going to come to you. And that's great that you have the skill and ability that was given by God. And I know that's for me, because when you have natural abilities to do things that were given by God, people are going to come and say, well done. Good job to you. And then that's when we need to fight the trap of pride and say, thank you, God, for that. What's interesting about this sermon is I gave this same talk in the first sermon, and what sometimes happens after you, on the microphone or I'm in front of people were saying, great job, Landry, in between these services. Very interesting, isn't it? Really good sermon. And that's great and funny because I'm teaching on pride. And in the moment, I always have to catch myself. Be like, hey, just making sure. Say thank you, and I'm very grateful. When I was younger, I would have been like, yeah, thank you. If someone said a great game after I played well, I'd be like, yeah, I did do well in my mind. I am the best. I see that face picture of my mind, like that was me thinking I'm the best. It's dangerous. Now, pride really did come before the fall of this king, Nebuchadnezzar, because he even had a dream interpreted about his destruction. He was told that he was going to be renounced and he was going to be isolated. Verse 33 of chapter 4, right after he speaks of that line that he spoke of his city, of how, look what I have done, look what I have built. Immediately after, it says in verse 33, what had been said about Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from people and ate grass like an ox. His body was drenched with dew of heaven until his hair grew like feathers of an eagle and his nails were like the claw of a bird. Now, this is a very graphic picture of someone who built a statue of themselves and then has feathers and has claws. And it's hard for us to relate to that dynamic as well. But this is a pretty extreme case. He literally was driven from everyone he knew and kicked out and isolated completely by God. The people initiated it. The third thing we can look at is pride refuses help. Now, this is what some of us may relate to a little bit more. Is that when we're prideful, we're very self-sufficient and we think everything we do is because of you and because of what you have built, and you're very good at making decisions, making things happen, and self-care. You're very independent, and that's great. Those are great things to be. But then if it's all about you and it's based on selfishness, when something happens in your life and you're unable to care for yourself, or people have to come around you, and you refuse the help, that's a clear sign that there might be pride in your life, right? Who's ever been in a situation where they have to get help? Like literally, you couldn't move or there was a sickness. Like I think maybe we've all had these things. And then all of a sudden you have to decide then, am I above that? Because pride says you can do it on your own. You can get through this. No, I can walk. I'm fine. I'm fine. Your leg snapped in half. And no, I got this. No, it's fine. Because everything you have built up in your life and you have done and you have accomplished. Then when it goes away, you're maybe immobile, then you can't accomplish those things. And then it's not about you anymore. Then other people have to come around behind you. And that's hard when you struggle with pride. I'll tell you a story. When I was in Egypt, I broke my leg when I was in Egypt. Terrible place to break your leg. Terrible place to go around on crutches for a while. And I'll tell you the backstory why this is interesting for me was because I was on a 4-month-long mission trip. The first ever mission trip I'd been on was in Cairo, Egypt. Really threw me into the deep end there. And when I was there, my leader got sick and bedridden. And I was the student, like, support leader, whatever you want to say. So then I had to take over the team. And this is back in my rugby, like, I'm 250 pounds, I can do anything days. I was 18, and I took over the team. And then what started happening was the ball got rolling. Things started happening. We were accomplishing a lot as a team. The team was working really well together. And in my mind, it was better than what it was before. People were getting saved. We were having amazing opportunities. We were praying for people. Ministry was going really well, and it hadn't been going really well previously. So then where did all that go to? My mind. And as a young, like, this is my first taste of real leadership. Like, hands-on, I became the reason why everything had gone so well. And the organization is calling me because I knew the dynamics. Said, are you okay? I said, we're doing absolutely fine. This is happening, this is happening, this is happening, and this is happening. Wow, Landry, that is fantastic. Really good job, and you're only 18. I know. You're laughing at my story, but I think we all may have stories like this of when you have taken the credit unnecessarily. So me as an 18-year-old, I'm conquering the ancient city of Cairo once again. I'm being honest, but like, pride has been a thing for me. And then all of a sudden, I'm playing soccer, and I snap my leg. And I'm stuck sitting down. A few things changed. I can't run things anymore. And the place I was at, and the pain I was at, because they didn't know it was broken. So I didn't get the treatment I needed. Side story. So I really couldn't do anything because I didn't deal with the situation correctly. And I had to get helped. People had to carry me. People had to get me food. And all of a sudden, everything I had quickly built in my mind, I was refusing. I can get it myself. No, I don't know. No, don't get me water. I'll get it. Have you ever tried carrying water or a bowl of cereal with crutches? It's so hard. It gets everywhere. But this is the place I was like, I don't need that help. I can do it. I'm stronger. I've got this. I didn't have this. And after a few weeks of living in this great hot city of Cairo on crutches, I knew God hadn't broken my leg, but I knew God wanted to teach me about humility through my broken leg. And sometimes scenarios happen in our lives, a sickness, whatever it could be, and God wants to just come and say, it's not all about you. And you need the people around you. And it's a quick check because pride has already isolated you and you think you can do it on your own, but we need the people God's put around us. God comes and he meets with us in those times sometimes. And for me, God met with me in a powerful way, and I just realized it was not about me, that trip. I needed to humble myself completely. I even went back to my leader and humbled myself before him because of my pride. And I grew, and then I have a lot more scenarios where I've had to grow as well. There's an interesting story in the book of Judges when God calls Gideon, and Gideon gets brought into a place because sometimes God, he helps us with our pride, and he makes it literally impossible for us to take any credit for ourselves. And this is what I think God has done for me multiple years now, because I'm really good at taking attention on myself, and God says, Landry, we got to stop that. That's why I love my job right now. Next week we have some baptisms. Some youth are getting baptized, and I couldn't be more excited about it. Listen to their testimonies. It's not about me at all. The work of the Holy Spirit did that. I have beautiful children, a beautiful wife. I do not deserve that. God's given me that. And I'm constantly reminded of God's faithfulness, and he humbles me to bring me back to the place of, I have accomplished nothing in myself, but through him only, and through what he has done. I think that's true for all of us. So Gideon was in this place. God called him, and he got called into greatness, which we all do. And I love getting instruction. I feel God's called me, and he's called you guys as well. But sometimes there's even a trap to say, my calling's better than your calling. Who's ever thought what God has for me is just here? Maybe you've thought that, well, I'm called to live in this nation. Oh my gosh, look at you. Wow, you're living there, you're doing this. Oh, I feel God has called me to go. And you just elevate even based on the calling God's given us. Then you know pride's an issue when you're doing that. Oh my goodness. And then what God sometimes does is he leaves there no room. So Gideon was getting this massive call to literally change history at the time of these people, to rescue the people, God was saying, using words like this, calling him a mighty hero. You're going to lead the nation out of the place they're in. And then what God did, what I love about pride and humility, God literally gave Gideon no room to take any accolades for himself. Because as he's going out to go and accomplish these things, he cut his army in half. Then he cut his army in half again. Then he said, hey, you're actually going to do this just with 300 men. Just a quick PS. So then Gideon and those men, they had no room to say that was us. Because it's literally impossible what they did without God. And I love this story because I'm I think God has done elements of this with my life as well. There's been no way I could accomplish what I have done without who God is. No way. The last thing we're going to talk about, the band can come up if the band is here. The last thing we're going to talk about is the answer to pride is really simple. It's great, the answer to pride, because if we have it, because we know God hates it, it grows, and it takes us away from people and from God, right? We're all on the same page. We're there. And the remedy for it and how we can kick it out and have victory over our lives is great. Lays it out really clearly in the Bible. It's through humility. It's through humbling ourselves before God. That's a simple way of giving thanks to God for what he's given us and praising him for what he's given us. Proverbs 11:2 says, when pride comes, there is disgrace. Hard language for those who are prideful. But with humility comes wisdom. James 4:10 says, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Daniel, to end this story about King Nebuchadnezzar, in Daniel 4:37, it says, now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right, and all his ways are just, and those who walk in pride, he is able to humble. So even the great example of the extremity of pride was humbled by God and came before God and said, I praise this God. And he's humbled me. What I love about the gospel too is it gives us no room, no ability to take it on ourselves and to have pride in what the situation is. In our relationship with God, it clearly says it is not by works, it is by faith. Which is awesome for people like me who struggle with pride and we like to stack up what we've done, maybe present it before God and say, well, God, this is the youth group I have, this is a young adult. Did you just see the sermon I just preached? It doesn't matter what we've done. It doesn't matter what your title is at work or how much you make or the car you drive or the degree you have. Before Christ, he made the playing field level. And he said it's not by what we've done, but it's by the faith we can come before God and have relationship with him. Isn't this beautiful news? So that means in the church, there's no competing. We don't have to compare. We don't have to belittle other people and say, well, I want to get closer to God. I want to tear this person away. I need to fight for that. No. Christ made a way for all of us, and it's because of nothing we've done. We just get to come before him and humble ourselves and say, God, I need you in my life. For me, I need to do that. For me, there is no way I am at the place I am at if it wasn't for who God is. There is no way I can praise God and say, God, you have filled my life with good things, like it says in the Psalms. Thank you, God, for that. There is no way I should be able to lead youth and have them think I'm a person to trust without who God is, without what He has done in my life. So for us, we need to come before God today and say, God, thank you for what you've done. Humble ourselves and say, Jesus, you're everything, not by what I have done, but by what you have done in my life. And I'm going to give you praise for that. And that's the good news of the gospel, of what Jesus has done for us to make it possible for us to have everything we have and be in relationship with God. He has done it all. Christ has done it all.